This guy.
That looks like something from Rocko's Modern Life, like a background.
Yeah.
Atlantis, you wrote on that piece of paper.
Yeah. That's what I was writing.
The lost continent of Atlantis. Should we get back into that stuff? I'd like to do an episode about Moo.
I'm reading this, or I'm looking at it at least.
Wisdom from Atlantis.
It's by Ruth Drown.
Welcome to another edition of Consensus Unreality.
You already started?
Yeah, I started.
Oh. Welcome to Consensus Unreality. The first episode.
Yeah, this is the new first episode, that's right.
This is what we're pinning at the top of our grid, as they're saying now.
Well, there's no grid on. I don't think RSS feeds work like that. You don't know.
And what's it mean to be off the grid?
Off the grid. That's right. We are kind of an off the grid podcast a little bit. I think that's what.
I don't think that's true.
Well, we're like I don't. Okay, so
we're off the radar.
Off the radar. Just talking to each other. Oh God, bury the lead. This is a public episode. We're coming up on our 5th year anniversary of the show.
Yeah,
the show being Consensus Unreality. So we thought that we would maybe kind of revisit what is Consensus Unreality. Maybe elaborate a little bit on what the show's been about, kind of directions that the show's gone in, maybe what we had in mind when we first started the show, and if we delivered on that.
I don't remember.
I think we kind of did. I think our original tagline was something like, and it might still be on our Apple and stuff. This is just showing how checked in we are to our to our status as influencers, but I do believe it says something like making new connections between the esoteric, highly strange, and paranormal, something along those lines.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the virtue of our program here. Maybe what separates our show is that we do look to excavate materials and topics that maybe other people have overlooked, or maybe just finding diamonds in the rough, kind of concentrating on that. And I like that because it kind of brings to light some things in some of the more highly trode, is that the word? Highly trode topics. Trod, yeah. I think that when you kind of look at some of that stuff that is maybe deeper cuts, it definitely highlights some unseen influences on some of the more prominent things. I think one thing we also do too is that it's not kind of like churning out topics and then just kicking them off to the side. I like to revisit stuff a lot and reread stuff on the show, a couple years later, pull books back off the shelf because I noticed something that might connect back into it.
Sure.
So I mean, that part I really enjoy. Kind of, it's this giant like basket that we're weaving that kind of like takes this weird form that doubles back on itself. Hell of a metaphor there, but
the basket doubles back.
Yeah, a non-basket basket. But yeah, I feel like we just did a double episode series about the law of one raw material, and that really had a lot of connections to a lot of things that we've talked about on the show previously.
We
originally I originally came up with like the notion of covering that when we were looking at material for our Pulp Magic series, which was last summer, and that was 4 long episodes.
That was last summer.
Yeah, I believe that was about last summer.
God, I'm old.
Yeah, time flies, man. Time's not real, man. But yeah, I mean, there was that was kind of exploring some of the exotica simulacra in 20th century occultism, and how that came to inspire things like the New Age movement and the UFO contactee materials. I think another thing maybe that I worry about is that our show kind of gets framed to people as a UFO program, and God, I don't want to be that.
Well, kind of in a way, but only when we're doing that.
Okay, so
like
we're like UAP guys.
No, but like sometimes for a stretch, we're just talking about that, and I feel like it's
Well,
okay to.
Yeah, but we're talking about it in a different way.
Yeah, sure. No, we're not like wearing a UFO hat. I would,
Well,
but you
that's
know
a
what
hell
I
of a
mean.
metaphor.
Yeah, right. It's not like dedicated to that. Although recently we've been pretty deep in that realm, but I feel like on the same token or by the same token, there's stretches where we haven't talked about UFOs for like a year or like for months. But yeah, I would not call us a UFO podcast, but
Yeah, and to put a pin in that, I think like what we try and do with the UFO thing, and this is something that I'd like to describe to maybe people that haven't heard the show in a while, or maybe new listeners that might hear this and listen to this to see what we're about. I think a big thing that we do is we look at a lot of the books, the UFO contactee material from the 50s, some of the earliest stuff that has a lot of strange new religious notions baked into it, a lot of theosophical stuff, and a lot of the stuff that comes out of the burned over district in New York, the spiritism movement, and things like the mystery religions and all the kind of like new cult religions of the 20th century that gets baked into the UFO thing, kind of looking at it as a mythopoetic symbol of the 20th century. And then kind of moving forward, and I think we've related it to things, like Burroughs and the CCRU, Derrida.
yeah,
I mean, we've kind of gone in a lot of directions with
Derrida. I don't remember that.
It was there. He was checked out. Went
I hate
right over
Derrida.
his head like a UFO.
As soon as I hear a French name, I'm like, oh boy.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Because we talk about Jacques Vallée, a beautiful French name.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it's about a holistic approach to all of these things, I guess. And also two people who are involved in other creative pursuits who come to this sort of as a meeting ground, I think is another way to think about it, where it's not often it'll kind of be a place where ideas are kind of generated. And so hopefully the spark of whatever that is kind of comes across sometimes as well, which I think ties into this idea of, yeah, generating new connections. Or I don't want people to have the sense that we're always going to be groundbreaking or anything like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're
No.
just talking about these things, but I think we're trying to talk about them in a way that is trying to get at something, as opposed to, kind of rehashing like Monster of the Week type stuff, which is a legitimate and time-tested approach as well, just, different.
Yeah, yeah. And not to fish out a word from 2014 or whatever, but I do think that we do kind of look at stuff and deconstruct it and kind of look at the elements I think something recently that I was looking at was the 23 Enigma, which, I think we talked about Cosmic Trigger by Robert Anton Wilson on our first episode 5 years ago. Um, a very
Yep.
inspiring book for us both, I think, and also, influential to a lot of people who rack their brain on these subjects. But it was cool to kind of break down the 23 Enigma in parts over the course of this year, just finding it in other places, unexpected places, like Malachi Martin's book on demonic possession, and then kind
Yeah.
of being like, well, that's strange that the 23 Enigma is factoring so strongly into this one story of demonic possession. And then, looking into the date actually in July and figuring out that it was Neptunalia, which I don't think is ever mentioned in Robert Anton Wilson's work, or really
Maybe.
elsewhere. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't remember seeing it, and I remember being interested and surprised by that when we kind of stumbled on it. So, but who knows? Maybe it's in a footnote somewhere. You never know, because he's pretty thorough. But
sure.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, for sure. He's torpedoing the concept that we're excavating new stuff in the episode that's supposed to
well, I
show
don't
these
like promise.
people.
I don't like promising something that can be
No, no, no,
disproved.
no, no, no. I mean, I'm just joking.
I know,
But
but yeah,
it's cool to
yeah,
like even so, like I don't think anybody's ever, and it's not like just tooting our own horn. I'm just kind of pointing out stuff that was like weird things that come up,
yeah,
that it's kind of, we make it our point to like be able to make these connections and present them on the show, which I think is a super fun thing. Like I couldn't really even find too much information verifying the stories in Malachi Martin's book, which presented a whole other fascinating spectrum of like these, possibly. I mean, if you're a secular person, you're probably saying, well, definitely manufactured demonic possession stories, but possibly completely made up. I don't know.
yeah,
Anyway, but you mentioned like generating stuff, and that's kind of another thing that we do on the show a lot, and that we have done in the past, is kind of documenting experiments that we do. In It's kind of like artistic. What would you like, generative practices? I mean, I wouldn't exactly say that we're doing magic, although sometimes it has bordered on chaos
yeah,
magic. And certainly we've recorded Ouija sessions on the talking board, and I've been revisiting the recordings of those sessions, which are available on our Patreon, as well as our full episode archive and our regular exclusive episodes.
yeah. We should talk about the Patreon, huh?
We'll get there. I don't want to make this a giant ad, but we do
No,
offer a way more stuff on Patreon, and it's the way to support what we do. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've been working on lately for some printed materials and some new offerings for the Patreon is taking some of these lines of text that were channeled through the talking board with Ben and I, and creating some sort of cipher out of them, and seeing how that could generate some form of text through bibliomancy. Does it overlay with some of the magical texts that are prominent in the 20th century or older, or some of the things that have been
yeah,
important to us? Certainly connecting it to the Voynich manuscript would be interesting, because in that Ouija session, the word Voynich came up, and talked about
right.
weird synchronicities with that. We talk about synchronicity stuff on the show a lot. And
Yeah, that's actually something that I feel like is maybe not unique about our show, but important to it is that it's kind of this long 5 year, you know, not experiment, but like a travel log and synchronicity and kind of tracing the way these things move through somebody's life who's interested in them. So I feel like even, if we've kind of gone through phases of being more straightforward, like interview show, and we go back and forth between that sometimes. We kind of go through series, we kind of approach it in a bunch of different ways. But if we looked at the whole thing, it might just be kind of like an interesting glimpse into what a person or two people's lives are like when they're purposefully dedicating time to studying stuff that is hard to understand and maybe slightly
Fringe.
maddening. Yeah,
Yeah,
well, yeah,
yeah.
fringe for sure, but stuff that kind of looks back at you in a weird way, like this kind of interactive
Right.
mystery of life. um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think
different from the way a history podcast about the same subject would be, I guess, is what I mean.
true. Yeah. And I also think kind of the what we're looking at, the materials that we're interacting with, how that affects and overlays our lives is really interesting too. I think we've kind of dealt with frustrations of uh, entering a tunnel reality of certain materials and looking at certain stuff for too long and maybe covering the
Yeah,
actual more nuts and boltsy stuff about UFOs and how that was kind of like even dipping our toes in that for a second was driving us totally nuts. But yeah, I mean that's kind of what we do. We do regular. We do most, our most consistent work on Patreon, where we do at least an episode a week. We try to do a public episode about every 2 weeks, and sometimes that'll have the Patreon episode after it. We also
right.
do a printed publication called Journal of Shells, which we started doing this year, which we're super excited about. It has archival texts that are, paranormally inclined, highly strange, occult, esoteric. We also contribute writings and imagery, and we source materials from new writers and artists. And some of the documentation of our experiments that we're doing and that we talk about on the show comes to fruition in that, and we plan to have it come to fruition more in that. Um, yeah. So, what do you think about what do you think about where we're at 5 years later?
Yeah, I don't know.
We've been through a
So much
lot
has
on the
happened,
show, on the air. Like that's
right?
kind of the one thing we're not mentioning. But if you go back
Yeah,
and look through, listen through our archive, there's some ups and downs, some rocky stuff that certainly coincided with magical experiments that we were doing,
yeah,
which is kind of funny. But we're still standing, and we're still very much about the show more than ever. So that's kind of why we're doing this.
yeah. A lot of weird synchronicity stuff that kind of is benign or neutral most of the time, but then for a little while, a couple of years ago, got kind of dark and a little bit strange. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like anything else, lasts a little while. I think things just kind of undulate in terms of their, rate of activity and that kind of thing. Um, yeah, 5 years in, it's kind of crazy. I don't know. I mean, maybe we can just talk about what we're looking at now, because, a lot of what we've been doing lately is on the Patreon. So maybe a glimpse kind of behind the curtain there. And, we completed that Pulp Magic series a couple months ago. We kind of have those series things that come up once in a while where we think there's kind of a theme that might be new or interesting in some way, and we try to look at it from a couple different angles. Lately, we did that raw channeling thing and kind of a more broad look at the channeling phenomenon of the mid 20th century.
Mm.
And I'm still kind of in that realm, although from a different angle. On the last episode on Patreon, I was talking a lot about this publisher in Los Angeles from the 30s to the 60s called Harry J. Gardner. And so I'm still kind of looking into that world a little bit, kind of mail order new age stuff. I was looking at Astara a little bit, which was a mail order new religion, kind of based out of that area as well. And now I'm kind of getting back into this woman, Ruth Drown, who was notorious for inventing these radio therapy machines that
Mm.
she said could cure all ailments. So I'm kind of getting into this kind of psycho, I don't know, this
It's like
like what do you call
radionic
that?
stuff, huh?
It's radionic stuff, but yeah, I can't remember if she's definitely doing stuff within the realm of radionics, but I
Like
don't know if she was an actual,
psychotronics.
yeah, psychotronic stuff and psionics and all this like quack medicine. I'm kind of just like in this little realm of like this interesting wild west of the 20th century in terms of spirituality, healing, that kind of thing. That's sort of my hobby horse at the moment. And I'll be going out to California in a few days and hoping to kind of scare up some vibes out there. I might go to the Forest Lawn Cemetery, I think it's called, where both Ruth Drown and Harry Gardner are buried. So I might go see what I can dig up, metaphorically, not literally,
Very nice. Yeah,
out
land of the
there. Yeah.
quacks out there.
Yeah, I love that stuff. And
Yeah,
just, yeah, new age stuff in general.
yeah.
I also feel like I need to address. We were talking about how like on the Patreon, like the rightward turn of the new age people. And I
Hmm.
was thinking about it, and I feel like it's probably not like a turn. I feel like the new age stuff has always had a pretty rightward lean with some notable exceptions. Um, if only because they're unexamined politically. Like they're kind of mostly like liberal or tending right. And then some of them
Yeah.
were like, yeah. For some reason, I was thinking about it. I was like, well, I don't feel like that's new.
Well, that's
I
see
feel like
that. Yeah, that's
a
an
lot of these
interest.
people are libertarian, like really, if you like got down to their actual politics, most of the new age people are probably libertarian.
Yeah, yeah, and that's like an interesting thing to try and extrapolate. Because I've been eagerly awaiting the arrival of some George Hunt Williamson books, and that
Yeah.
is in that window of time that you're talking about, early 1960s, uh, going back into the 50s, right, with his interactions with George Adamski and William Dudley Pelley.
Yeah.
Um, and that's, really like a time where you have this melting pot of like new pseudo cultish religious activity mixing with the flying saucer, new mythology, sci-fi stuff, and a kind of like a new agey sci thing as well. And you also have the infiltration therein of fringe political beliefs. Sometimes, with in the case of somebody like William Dudley Pelley, obviously being on the far right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that is interesting to look at, and think about. And I think maybe when we kind of get into these two, not disparate materials, but two different materials, although both of them kind of have a connection to radio, which is pretty funny because George Hunt
Right.
Williamson was making his channeled communications to Venusians and
Right.
denizens of outer worlds via radio telegramy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an interesting synchronous little connection there. That those two things kind of connect in that way that we haven't really discussed before this moment. But yeah, I think also looking at the two of those things and maybe digging out some of that political ideology that might be embedded in there is an interesting thing to look forward to.
Yeah.
I've also kind of just been randomly looking at the Arthurian Round Table mythology and um, some of the esoteric readings on that stuff, although it's obviously a very esoteric thing to begin with. But
Yeah.
that's
I
kind of,
love that stuff.
yeah, for sure. And the history of it is super interesting. And the texts themselves, obviously, but then, it also kind of gets you back into the world of people like Manly P. Hall,
Yeah.
who's always a good primer on, describing some of those symbols and how they relate to esoteric concepts.
Yeah. Yeah. Hall's cool. I'm going to try and hit the Philosophical Research Society when I'm out there. Wouldn't it be really funny if I died? And then there's I have all these plans and then the plane crashes. Wouldn't that be funny?
Um,
Wouldn't you laugh?
I might chuckle. I could chuckle.
I'm just kidding. I feel like
Yeah,
the more you talk about how something terrible is going to happen,
right.
you kind of push it away. Like, because what are the
Oh, is that what you
chances?
think? I think
I do,
well,
yes.
you manifest it into reality.
No, no, I think it's
You're thought forming
anti-manifestation.
it.
It's like knocking on wood. It's like I know that this possibility is there, so if you name it, it's kind
Anti
of afraid.
manifestation.
Yeah, that's right. Although at the same time, there is
Mm,
if
I don't know.
with good things, you don't want to mention them at
This,
all.
if it happens, this could be looking back on this episode would be bad.
No, it would be good. It would, for the cost of one human life, you could prove something.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, true. You could definitely
Uh,
prove something.
yeah, no,
Not even the
the more you talk about
skeptics.
something bad,
Coincidence.
maybe this isn't true. Maybe I'm just manifesting something terrible. Uh, how do I get out of
You'll
this
be
terrible
fine. Just
curse?
take a pill.
I will take a pill. I'm gonna
Yeah.
take a big fat. Mm, what can you take on a plane? What do people take? Dramamine?
Yeah. All kinds of stuff you could take.
An
Pepsi.
Advil?
Yeah. I,
Yeah.
baby aspirin.
I don't need baby aspirin. All right.
Keep your heart in
Yeah.
check.
Do you think that there was an Atlantis?
Um, man, you're really gonna pop that on the episode. It's like
Should have asked that on the first show. Could have
I feel
saved a
like
lot
we
of
did
time.
we did Atlantis pretty early.
Yeah, yeah,
Because I
that's
was
true.
like really into that Ignatius Loyola Donnelly book.
Oh, yeah, that's a good book.
It's a pretty cool book. I've over the years seen that historically it has had some gaping holes punched into it, but as all Atlantis stuff does. But it's one of those
Well, it's all
cool.
made up.
Well, the that book is like um, the objective is to kind of like tie together, almost like that simulacric web of Exotica. It sort of ties together different cultures and is like, well, look, these
Right.
two things are pretty similar. There must be a lost continent. And I think that all that lost continent stuff is in the least a very interesting mythology that
Yeah.
has prevailed. And it's not just a Western thing either. I mean, you have Mu, although Lemuria is a very Western thing, right? That comes straight out of Theosophy.
Thanks. Well, yeah. Now I'm on the spot. I don't know. But
I'm
probably
pretty
from that
sure that was
same
the
era.
invent in like the Victorian era of some
Yeah.
Theosophists.
I'm not gonna. Speaking of Lemuria, I looked at my passport photo from
Atlantis, I don't know. You're going to get me off the question now? You want to
my
ask me the
passport
Atlantis of
photo
this, and now you're talking. You want to give people your
from
passport
2020.
number.
That looked
Give them your
horrible.
credit card number.
It looks so messed up. Holy crap. I just had to get that off my chest. It looks like if we're to trust Google AI, which is just ripping from Wikipedia. So if we're trusting Wikipedia,
Whipplepedia.
It's a continent proposed in 1864 by Philip
Bam.
Sclater.
See? Who knows
So
this
that's
shit?
the era. Uh, hmm. Ernst Haeckel suggested in 1870 that Lemuria could be the ancestral home of humans. Uh, I thought he was supposed to be smart. Just kidding. It's probably true. It's probably all real. But this is all so much more fun if you just assume while you're talking about it that it's real.
Yeah. Well, there was like, I don't know, there's always a theory that comes out every 20 years or so on Atlantis, maybe even less than that now, that is like, well, it's actually here. Like there was just a documentary that came out last
Yeah,
year that was saying that it was somewhere outside of Egypt in Africa, like a port in
I
Africa.
remember that. Yeah.
Um, I always liked the Casey Bimini Road thing, although I've heard that obliterated very recently too. Um,
Yeah,
that
none of it stands up to like scientific uh rigor, but it doesn't have to. I don't think that the you can't apply scientific methods to spiritual
yeah,
things.
nice.
Although if they're trying to prove it as if you're trying to prove a spiritual thing as scientific, it won't work either. It works the other way. Uh,
Fucking
so let's just,
Thomas Aquinas over here.
little Thomas Aquinas. Say we have a new pope,
Yeah, exactly. You don't even want to talk about that,
an American pope.
right?
What does this mean?
Tons. We can't. We're not doing Vatican II stuff on the public episode. You got to pay for that. Be
Uh,
reading some real devilish Malachi Martin books from the mid-century to explain what the hell's going on there. Um, but yeah, okay. Check out patreon.com/consensus unreality. Definitely the best place to get the full spectrum of what we do. Well, if you can't support the show, then we'll definitely tune into our public episodes. We'll be putting some interviews and some conversations between Ben and I up there from time to time on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. Probably about every 2 weeks or something like that. Maybe you'll join up later. So I guess that's kind of the explanation about what consensus unreality is.
yeah, I feel like we're forgetting something.
Probably.
Uh, Something absolutely essential to the public's understanding of what the show is, but I guess we'll never know.
Well, when I thought about the idea um, to do this, to me, I feel like we kind of go into these wormholes on Patreon with topics and stuff. And I think that maybe some of that gets lost in the public stuff.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to explain what we try and do with the show and really kind of map out these mythological territories and like what you talked about too, how interesting it might be to listen to two people tightrope walking over quicksand on some of these topics, because they are kind of things that do suck you in and
Right.
are often strange, maddening tales. Topics that really, I mean, it's interesting to be so involved in researching topics that so often drive people insane.
Yeah, it's there's something about it that's obviously captivating. And I'm like, as a person, I tend toward obsessively looking into a certain subject for as long as I can until I've sort of felt like I've gotten to something. And so that's, for my part of the show, I feel like that's kind of just a part of my nature is to sort of just devour or investigate a certain facet of this kind of thing and then move on to the next thing, whether it's related or not.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of the missing part of this conversation too, is that we sort of shot called maybe the current state of affairs by calling the show Consensus Unreality, because there is sort of a looming sense of unreality that's growing, especially in the West. And
Yeah.
I think that the mainstreaming of a lot of the topics that we talk about, and seeing a lot of people kind of blindly following the information as if it's Bible truth,
Yeah.
is kind of what, like, maybe what drives us to keep doing the show is being able to pull on the threads of these things and sort of detail their lineage, detail maybe why they came into being, and do our best to connect them to other things from the past, other things in the present, things that we know about from looking at so much of this strange material, whether it be, ghost stories, folk tales, UFO abductee
Yeah.
research, or, the occult Enochian doctrines. Like we kind of look at that whole wide net that is cast by strange nonfiction.
Well, a recent one that's really weird is I don't know, did you see that Pitchfork article about TikTok having like this weird vril thing?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Uh, so like the sort of like
Vril, yes,
vril,
yeah,
VRIL, hard to convey over over Zoom. Vril, stupid, stupid ass kind of well, whatever. Interesting, interesting concept developed out of basically a sort of romantic gothic science fiction
yeah.
novel
I don't even
by
think it's like
Leighton.
stupid to be like
I think it's kind of
the
stupid.
Bulwer Lytton is like. I mean,
I mean, it's fine.
Vril is like an ether energy. That's its concept is
Yeah, you know
prevalent
what
in
it
a
really
lot of
is.
different new age, or not even new
Yeah.
age, like a lot of different new religious stuff.
No, it's not stupid, but the way the life that it has now is stupid, I think.
Maybe on
And
TikTok, yeah,
and everywhere. I mean, I
and
think
all
it's
the whole
not like a
neo-Nazi thing, obviously.
yeah, right. That's dumb.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's basically just kind of like a buzzword, which, you know, whatever, but I can't. Anyway, seeing that, I feel like, and I think we covered it, and other people have covered it very well for decades. But doing our small part to talk about how that's not like, there was probably, there was definitely no, shoot, what's her name?
Maria Orsic.
Maria Orsic, this whole story of the Tula Society and all of this
Well,
stuff.
Tula Society was real. The
It
You're
was real.
thinking of
The
the
Vril, is that what they're called? The Vril.
was
I
it
know that the Tula
I thought
Society
that
were real.
like that the idea that there was a channeling group who channeled discarnate
Yeah.
entities who gave
Yeah, that was
the
fake.
Nazis like
I think it might have just been like
hidden
the Vril
technology. Yeah,
Society.
they might have been called the Vril Society or
This
something.
is yeah, we're so good at this we can't remember the name, but
Well, that's
we
kind of a
did
deep
we did
cut,
cover. Yeah.
And I do
Anyway,
think
none of
it's
that's
just the
real.
Vril Society. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. But it is tied in with the lore of there actually being a sort of Nazi adjacent occult society and there being an interest in occultism within the higher ranks of some of the SS people. But anyway, that sort of having this like kind of not apolitical, but like very divorced from the realities of its time, this kind of interesting impact on, popular-ish, subculture-ish kind of discourse is interesting. And I feel like I mean, we're well past the like, 2016 conspiracy theories going mainstream moment that kind of influenced the early part of our show.
Yeah.
Like talking about QAnon and like the way that these things were kind of happening so quickly. We're in this like weird free fall where it's all like depoliticized, but then like everything else is like
Well, the
hyper
information is
politicized.
like decentralized,
It's just
in
like a bunch of
an
floating
extreme
points.
way. Yes. But an interesting update on that. I think when we first talked about the Vril Society some years ago, we did a 2-part thing on the Hollow Earth, and then some of um, the Nazi UFO conspiracy stuff that is in books out there. But at that time, we were kind of discussing how there were like History Channel documentaries that I remember seeing when I was a teenager that would talk about Maria Orsic as if she
course,
was a
yeah.
real figure. But now, if you look up Vril Society, it actually says that it's a fictitious secret society. So there's been some
Yeah, I
sort
just
of
looked it
like
up too.
update on that,
Somebody, yeah.
which is it's just interesting in itself.
Because I,
Uh,
yeah, I remember when we were looking into it a couple of years ago, it was just like, good luck. You're gonna have to figure out for yourself.
yeah, yeah, and we even
You're
talked
gonna
about
have to read
that
these
with
books,
Paul Weston in our interview in
right?
like 2022, I think.
Yeah. So it looks like some work has been done, but who knows how much of like that kind of thing is AI now? Like, I don't even really know how to use Google anymore. Well, all right,
Nice,
boomer hour,
hell yeah,
but whatever. Um,
selling the show. This guy doesn't even know how to use Google.
I don't even know what is Google. It sounds like nonsense. I don't know. I think talking about these things retains a level of importance. Just so I think if you're just talking about anything with any level of intelligence, whatever that is for us,
I
is
don't know.
important.
All I can think about now is like saying what is Google is a joke like years too late. So it just seems like you're a guy with dementia.
Uh-huh.
Like, what is, where am I?
What's Google?
Help? Can I have some help? Um,
Facebook.
yeah. So that's cool. I don't know.
Me
Uh,
neither.
that's cool though. Yeah. I'm glad that Vril's really catching fire. Catching Vril. All right. Do you have anything else?
Take a chance on the Patreon, please. No, I'm just kidding.
Ew.
Uh,
Jesus.
it's funny.
We're gonna
That's,
put Ben through broadcasting school.
that's what people do. Please help me, please. Yeah,
A leper over here.
yeah. My hands are out. Um, yeah, no, it's fun. I think that we kind of settled into a good rhythm with this thing where we have the public facing aspect of it, which is sort of an iceberg tip. And that's kind of just like how these sorts of programs run these days. Like all podcasts, you know,
Yeah. Yep.
it's a vessel.
For sure. I am confident that we'll talk about books and materials that not many other people have. And we'll also talk about stuff that they have. But
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we did
Like
like in
always.
our Pulp Magic, we did an episode about Crowley, but I think I've listened to so much stuff about Crowley that it was, I really wanted to work hard to like talk about him in kind of a different way and bring up different points that maybe
As a
were
father.
as a father of Alistair. Or
Yeah, and I think it's a good like what's the word? Like gauge of our success at that goal. When like, we're talking about a figure and we look it up like, podcast episode about T Love saying Rampa.
right,
And there's like, there's a couple others. There's like one or two interviews with like occultist scholars. There's one like with like a Tibetan scholar who's like, this guy's horrible. He's ruined my life. And then there's like two like sci-fi book collectors who were just making fun of it. So it was kind of cool to, when we find a figure that's important, known, but there just hasn't really been like a podcast genre discussion of him yet. I feel like that's kind of the spot that we look for.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay, very cool. Well, we hope this may be just a good primer. We're not like advertisers and we're not influencers. We kind of just do our own thing. So I thought maybe this was a good way to kind of, if people who haven't been keeping up with the show or maybe you've never heard the show, like this is kind of just a primer of the kind of stuff we do. And maybe
Yeah.
you'd like to listen to that stuff. I don't know. That's why we did this. But thanks for listening, if you did, and we'll be back on Patreon next week talking about some of that stuff that we had mentioned earlier in the episode. Cool. Catch you next time.